everyone, and welcome back to the Her Hoop Stats podcast. My name is Chelsea Lay, and I am joined here by Richard Cohen for a special pre-WNBA trade deadline special. The trade deadline is becoming an exciting point in the WNBA season, despite not really having much pull in past seasons, but with so much going on this year around expansion, contracts, free agency coming up, where about 80% of the players will be free agents. The trade deadline has kind of risen in, popularity and, what is the word I'm looking for? Probably importance. There we go. We'll use that one. So Richard and I are going to talk about that today, specifically commenting on his recent post to the Her Hoop Stats newsletter, which went and broke down every team in the WNBA and whether or not they would be sellers or buyers at the trade deadline if they decide to do anything at all. So, let's get into that first because, this is interesting given, where we're at in terms of the WNBA right now. Longer season, injuries are popping up. There's also a lot going on in terms of, like I just said, contracts, with free agency coming up. And so let's actually start with sellers because I think that's an interesting topic. We have a lot of teams who are kind of either in playoff spots or trying to get into playoff spots or, at the bottom and don't really have a playoff spot to fight for. And so that kind of indicates, I guess, selling in a lot of cases. So let's talk about some of your teams that you think are sellers at the trade deadline.
Well, I think if you look at the standings, we've got 10 teams who can genuinely consider themselves in a playoff hunt, and then 3 who really would have to admit that they're not.
Yeah.
In that you've got Chicago, Connecticut, and Dallas, who really are largely out of the running.
Yeah.
Dallas kind of made their move already with the Dejanay-Carrington trade that we saw, and with cutting Tierra McCowan, who might have been in discussion with some teams as well.
Yeah.
After that, I think Chicago are one of the most interesting teams because they should be selling everything, and they've got lots of people who might be of interest.
Yeah.
But it's a little complicated because are any of these players going to get any kind of meaningful return, and who's going to come to them with the offers? I think Ariel Atkins is clearly the biggest piece.
Yep.
But obviously hasn't been healthy lately. Did just get upgraded to questionable for tonight's game after being just listed as out for several recent games and missing, I think, the last 3 weeks now.
Yeah.
So if she's healthy, she becomes very interesting to a lot of teams and entirely tradable if they're willing to make that move, because they obviously gave up a lot for her and said at the time they were hoping she would be sort of part of the future, part of the rebuild, that they wanted to keep her beyond this year. So if that's still the plan, then obviously you don't move her on. But I think they should be changing that plan, personally.
Yeah, I mean, you think about Chicago and all of their moves this year. They traded away their number 3 pick for this year, which turned into Sonia Citron. That was the Ariel Atkins trade. When you allude to, they gave up a lot for her. And then you think about the fact that first of all, they're right now not 13th, but 12th in the standings, but they have lost their last 8 games in a row. And so they're like you said, they're not in a spot where they're going to be fighting for a playoff spot. And then you think about the fact that they don't own their first round pick for next year. So there's not even a benefit to them not making the playoffs, with where other teams would be like, okay, at least we get a lottery pick as a rebuilding team. They don't even have that. So, in my head, I'm like, you should be, again, like this should be a flash garage sale. I don't know what you call it in England. Yard sale, garden sale, whatever it is.
Fire sale,
just be fire sale. There you go. They should just be, they need picks. Like, I understand that probably the 2 players that aren't on the trading block would be Angel Reese and Camila Cardoso, but everyone else, like, they should be making phone calls, see what they can get. I understand that not a lot of their players have trade value right now, given the way that the team has been playing, but at the same time, it's not like you're like, okay, we're losing this season, but we're going to rebuild next year with a top 3 pick. You don't have that pick. So,
Well, I mean, they're going to get they own Phoenix's pick, and they've got swap rights with Connecticut. So
okay.
they're going to get Connecticut's pick more than likely. But with Connecticut, with the 2-year sort of system that we use for lottery rights,
Yeah,
that's probably going to end up being something like 5th, somewhere around there. But yeah, they're going to get a decent pick, but probably not someone who's a franchise changer. We'll see what happens then.
exactly. And it's like you have to think about where the draft is next like year in terms of talent, of course. But you also think about the fact that there's 2 expansion teams coming in as well, so they'll get picks around 6th or 7th as well. But yeah, it's like when you're thinking about how Chicago, because of the 2-year thing, like you said, I mean, to explain that a little bit more, when the WNBA kind of weighs lottery odds, they take the last 2 seasons into account instead of the last, just the last season. And so with Connecticut being a semifinals team last year and now being, a lottery team, their chances aren't of getting, a high pick aren't as high as say Chicago, because they've been in the lottery the past few years, Dallas, et cetera, et cetera. And so, yeah, even a 5th pick, when you had the 3rd pick this year, and you probably could have had like a 2 or a 3, maybe even a first pick next year, is an interesting way of putting it. And I mean, there's so much talk about, like what they were doing this season, if they wanted to contend. I mean, Courtney Williams and or not Courtney Williams, Courtney Vandersloot ending up being injured definitely didn't help that. But yeah, they definitely should be sellers at this deadline.
Yeah, I mean, Atkins is the bigger piece that might get you at least a first rounder back, but people like Elizabeth Williams, Rebecca Allen could at least draw some kind of interest, depending on sort of what teams are looking for and how much cap space that they've got to work with. Maybe, I mean, I was also listed in the article that sort of Michaela Onyenwere, Rachel Banham even could draw some interest, but yeah, you're getting a second round pick for those sorts of players rather than what you might get for Atkins. I can't see them getting a first for Allen or Williams at this stage.
No, yeah, it's rough. But anyway, moving on. What's another team that you think should be sellers?
Well, my next most interesting maybe seller is Washington, because
Okay.
they're now, I mean, they're a playoff contender, whereas maybe we weren't expecting them to be at the start of the season. But they
No.
also have players that other teams are going to be interested in most obviously Brittany Sykes is the as their all-star veteran. Everyone knows what she brings to a team. She's got experience coming off the bench as a supporting player, as well as sort of main role that she's played in Washington this year. She can add defense. She creates off the dribble. She could be a useful player for a lot of teams, but again, the size of the contract does make it a little complicated for some of them. We've also obviously heard that Aaliyah Edwards has been on the trading block for a while now. See if somebody makes an offer that they're willing to take. Maybe Emily Enksler if they weren't going to move on from Edwards.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think they're interesting partly to see whether they want to move these players on anymore, or whether now that they're in playoff contention, they want to try and keep this unit together and push for that 7th, 8th seed, sort of seeing value in the likes of, Iriafen and Citron getting playoff experience, whether that's more valuable than what they could get in return for some of these players.
Yeah, and I think Washington is in a very interesting spot right now, not just playoff wise, but a lot of these teams have to be thinking about what they're going to be doing in the off season, about who they're going to try, in terms of free agency targets. Also, the expansion draft is a huge thing. And you think about last year, I mean, the rules haven't been set in stone for this year. They could be different than last year, but last year, teams were allowed to protect 6 players from the expansion draft. And so you think about Washington and if you're trying to protect, if you have, Shakira Austin, you have Georgia Amore, who is going to be a rookie next year now, given the fact that she was injured, Sonia, Kiki, Aaliyah Edwards is one that is still under contract that you could protect. The list goes on. And if you only have a certain amount of players to protect, that leaves other players vulnerable. And for a player like Aaliyah Edwards, who again would very likely be picked up by a team like Toronto because that's her home team, could be a great franchise player for the team, you kind of end up in that risk of, okay, we could let her not be protected because we have, Sony and Kiki and all these players and whatever that we need to protect. But at the same time, like, she has such a higher chance of being picked up if unprotected because of the fact that she's super talented, because of the fact that Toronto is going to be the one picking. And so, like, you kind of have to weigh, do you try and get something back for that by trading her now, or do you try and just hope that you get lucky with the rules with the expansion draft coming out and you can work out some way to keep her? So I think that's kind of what they've been balancing for the past few months on whether or not to trade her. But also they just have a lot of depth right now in the front court, given that Shakira Austin has been healthy this season. Kiki Iriafen has been developing a lot faster than maybe suspected, and then Aaliyah Edwards as well, and Steph Dolson is also kind of in that mix for front court minutes as well. So it's an interesting situation in Washington, because as much as I would love them to get playoff experience and have this whole team stay intact, at the same time, it could be interesting for them. They could be a big free agency a target for people, just given the promise that their young players have.
Yeah, I think that for a lot of teams, because there are so many impending free agents, sort of an expansion draft, if the rules stay the same, may not be that much of a concern, because you're only going to have a few people under contract that you need to protect, and then maybe a couple more that you're worried teams might take as the player that they get to instantly call the unrestricted free agent.
Yeah.
But in Washington's case, they have so many young players that a lot of those players are still going to be under contract through this season, because those when you look around, that 20% after the 80, most of those players are the ones who are on rookie scale contracts, and Washington have a lot of those.
Yep.
So yeah, they're going to have more concerns about maybe Aaliyah Edwards would be that seventh player after you've already protected six. So in that case, do you take what you can get now rather than potentially losing her to that team with all the merchandise on the wall behind you?
Yep.
who I imagine would be quite keen to take her. Yeah.
Oh yeah.
You're not allowed to trade them to the Tempo yet, unfortunately.
No.
I don't think that's within the rules.
No, and it's funny because I saw the rules are different in soccer, obviously, but the NWSL is expanding quite quickly, and Denver has a team coming out next season. And so they had traded for a player who was born in Colorado, but they loaned her back to the team for the rest of the season. So she'll play out the rest of the season, and I think it's Orlando, and then go play for Denver next year because of this trade. And I was like, that would be so interesting if basketball players could go out alone.
I have wondered about that in the past. Yeah. A loan system. It's difficult within a scheme where you've got a hard salary cap and limited roster spots. How you would negotiate that? But yeah, it would be an interesting concept.
Exactly, because then Toronto could start trading for players and then just loan them back for the remainder of the season. But yeah, that would probably happen with Aaliyah Edwards if the rules and the salary and all of that would allow it. But anyway, it's definitely an interesting situation with Aaliyah, uniquely as a player, given, like we've been saying, Toronto would be so eager to pick her up, given, the cultural implications, the fact that she's just a good player, she's young, you get a franchise piece for the foreseeable future. But I think I agree with you that Washington is in such an interesting spot, and I'd be so intrigued to see if they end up making some moves before Thursday's deadline. So anyway, is there any other sellers that you have on the top of your list?
I mean, Connecticut, obviously, like Chicago, should be selling anything that anyone wants to buy. The question is whether they get offers, because Marina Mabrey asked for a trade in preseason, and they basically said no. Presumably because they didn't get an offer they liked. I mean, that's the main reason that teams say no when people make trade requests.
Yeah.
But as I mentioned in the article, the question is whether any of those offers have changed, because if they didn't like them 3 months ago, what are there any good reasons they're going to like them now? Maybe you take the value that's on offer, even if someone's offering next to nothing, because why not at this point?
Yeah.
You can give her minutes to Layla Lacan and JC Sheldon, people like that, rather than letting her soak up minutes and shots. You give them to your youngsters instead.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
yeah, I think. And then I mean, we were maybe going to get onto them in the buyers, because I think they're in kind of a flux position with LA.
Yeah.
Whether are you a seller, are you a buyer? They've won so many games recently; it's got them back in the playoff hunt. And yeah, I think when people were discussing trade options, sort of a couple of months ago, Azare Stevens was a very popular candidate to go to other teams, having a career year, very useful player, a lot of length to sort of help you out defensively, but able to stretch a defense. I'm not convinced they're going to be willing to move that now that they're kind of back in the race and things are looking better for them. But yeah, it's a matter of which direction you want to jump in their case.
Yeah, it's weird for those teams that are in that bubble. It's them, it's Golden State, it's Washington who are kind of in that race for the last playoff spot right now. You don't know which way it's going to go. And LA kind of has that mix of young and experience. They have Kelsey Plum, they have De'Erica Hamby, they have Azare Stevens, who are these like really talented and have had great seasons. But then you also have this like youth movement as well that still needs time to develop. And so I don't know. I could see them just holding tight and seeing how the rest of the season goes, seeing who they can retain in the off season, and then hoping to make more of a push next season.
Yeah, I think they'll probably try to keep this core together. It would. I mean, your veterans aren't going to appreciate it, and neither are your fans, if you signal that you're essentially saying, "Yeah, we're in the playoff hunt right now, but we don't want to be.
Yeah.
We'd like to get rid of some of these stars so that we get a little bit worse, get back into the lottery, and maybe add a pick or two along the way." I mean,
Yeah.
I think sort of also maybe because we're a league that hasn't seen that much tanking over the years, apart from the one Griner year, if you were around back then, when Phoenix did everything to they could possibly do to drop into that lottery.
Yeah.
But we don't have the same history of it that leagues like the NBA do, where all the
Yeah.
fans are used to this sort of concept of trying to be bad for a year or two in order to help your future. So I
Yeah.
don't think the fans would particularly appreciate if LA starts selling people off at this point.
It's also like a weird like I don't think the WNBA is really a league that you can effectively tank in because one, you'd have to do it for 2 seasons, and two, like the league is always in so much flux in terms of like, you know, who's good, who's bad. You know, players have breakout seasons. All the players are really good, so it's not like you have a team that just like has a bunch of duds. Like it's hard because most teams have like a star or two at least. And then, you know, you think about say like Minnesota, one year is in the lottery and then they are able to get back into championship contention so soon. So like the cycle of rebuilding is so much shorter in the WNBA than the NBA. And so I feel like, you know, losing a year to tanking means a lot more to a WNBA team than it would to an NBA team. But yeah, I think, and I mean, no team even in the NBA is going to truly admit that they're tanking. They're going to, you know, frame it with different words and
The
you know,
process, yeah.
yeah, the process and rebuilding and all the things that I've heard in Toronto for the past few years. But yeah, I think it's interesting with LA given it's hard for these like middle teams because again, in the
Yeah.
WNBA, you're like in a 7, 8, 9, 10 spot. You're not exactly good enough to make a championship run, but you also are so close to that lot. It's like what's the good in being like a 7th or 8th seed just to get knocked out in the first round and then not get a lottery pick if you own your pick, right? It's like a weird place to be in. So I understand the confusion of like whether to buy or sell at the deadline.
Yeah, I think in a vacuum, teams in that seventh, eighth, ninth spot really ought for their future to be trying to get worse.
Mhm.
You'd probably be better off finishing ninth and getting the pick, because
Yep.
it is so rare in this league that a seventh, eighth seed manages to win even a first round game to
Yep.
extend that series. It's definitely rare that they're going to win that series and make an actual run.
Yeah.
So for your future in a vacuum, you ought to be trying to get out, but that's a difficult thing to do because you're trained to try and win, and
Yeah, exactly.
your players want you to try and win. Your fans want you to try and win. So when you're on the edge of a playoff spot, that's what you feel you ought to be doing, and especially in a league where it's been 8 teams out of 12 to make the playoffs for a long time. It's hard to miss the playoffs sometimes
Yeah, and I
because
think
you can be like 5 games under 500 and still make it.
and still make it, yeah. Um, this season, I think, is also a very particular time where you don't wanna be in that, like, just barely out of the lottery spot because you think about the lottery now, 5 teams, 1 to 5 picks is the lottery, and then those 2, 6, and 7 is probably going to be Toronto and Portland. So then you get bumped to an 8th pick,
Yeah. It's a
and
long drop
it's
potentially, yeah.
it's a long drop from 5 to 8, especially in, some of these drafts where the top 5 talent, top 6 is a lot, and then sometimes there's a little bit of a drop off when you get to the end of the first round. And yeah, so if you're a team that ends up in that little bubble, you end up losing your first round playoff game or whatever, and then you end up just way farther down the draft line if like you just have your pick outright, then then you would be. It's a weird season to kind of be on that bubble.
Yeah, uh, this is a weird season in a lot of ways,
I
but
mean,
yeah.
so true. Yeah, it's just it's been yeah, it's a lot. But anyway, let's kind of flip into buyers at the deadline. Just given, we've already seen a trade. I mean, Minnesota and Dallas made that trade over the weekend where Dejanay Carrington went to Minnesota in exchange for Diamond Miller, Carly Samuelson, who is injured for the rest of the season and has been waived by the Wings, and then that second round 2027 draft pick. And so, obviously Minnesota we knew was going to make some sort of move closer to the deadline. Are they done, in your opinion?
I think when it comes to trades, probably, because
Hmm.
there's not a lot left that they're gonna wanna give up.
Yeah.
They don't have a lot of cap space or a lot of people to sort of make to add in a salary into a deal. Even I tried to put something together to maybe get Elizabeth Williams as an extra post for them, but
Yeah.
even their remaining cap space and Maria Kliundakova would not get you enough to fit in Williams's $100,000 contract. So yeah, I think probably they're done for trades. And but what that Carrington trade did along with adding the player was it opened up a roster spot because you had Diamond Miller and Samuelson going out
Yeah.
and only Carrington coming in. So I imagine they'll be looking to add someone in that spot. Who that'll be, who knows? I've seen people suggest that they might go after Tiara McCowan. I'm not convinced she's really a Cheryl Reeve kind of player,
Mm,
especially on this team with sort of how quickly they like to play, how much they like to move the ball.
yeah.
Yeah, I'm not convinced that's a fit. But anyone who knows who else there might be available to come in at that spot. I imagine they'll be looking for a post, especially with the Nafisa Collier injury that they're going to
Yeah.
have to handle for the next few weeks now.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I mean, another team that is big and has made a few moves, I mean, Emma Meesman probably being the big one is New York. As we talk about that kind of rivalry at the top there, is New York, do you think, done with moves as well?
Again, yeah, I think they're probably done. They had an open roster spot and gave it to Steph Talbot even
Mhm.
before they made the Meeseman signing, which then meant they had to cut Jalen Sherrod. I don't think again that there's anyone on that roster they're going to want to give up.
Yeah.
You could argue they maybe need another point guard with Sherrod gone because after Cloud and Sabrina Ionescu, where's your next ball handler if one of them was to get hurt? I don't. You're going to Brianna Stewart if she's healthy again as sort of a pseudo point guard, or you're going to
Mhm.
Maureen Johannes, who doesn't
Mhm.
really like to play point.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I think they would be willing to just cope with that possibility rather than making some sort of small trade. I mean, I suggested in the article that maybe if you were worried about that, you'd give up someone like Rebecca Gardner and go after someone like Lindsay Allen from Chicago as a actual point guard. But I
Yeah.
don't think they do that. I think they see too much value in those sort of long wing type players that they've got a whole cadre of in New York these days. But yeah, I think there's too much value there, and they'll ride it out.
Yeah, and so, looking at the rest of the league, and now I guess we're kind of talking about playoff teams here, but who do you think could be a potential interesting buyer ahead of Thursday's deadline?
absolutely top of my list is Seattle, but I've been saying it since preseason,
Yep.
so I'm still waiting on them to do something.
And
Um,
do something, poking with a
yeah, I
stick.
mean, I wanted them to trade it's not Carly, Katie Lou
I
Samuelson.
get them mixed up all the time as well, don't worry. The K's and the yeah, it's a whole thing.
Yeah, I wanted them to trade Katie Lou Samuelson once she got hurt and that contract became essentially just a number on a sheet because
Yep.
she can rehab anywhere. They decided not to do that. They sort of waited until they had room to add Tiffany Mitchell, and yeah, now the difference now is that Alicia Clark has basically fallen out of the rotation, which
Mhm.
then makes her um, entirely tradable, $185,000 piece.
Mhm.
Um, if you're willing to include her in a deal, then you're within reach of the people that kept coming up quite a lot in my article. You're within reach of the Brittany Sykeses, the Ariel
Mhm.
Atkins, Maisha Hines Allen, if you wanted to go after someone who might cost, a little less in draft capital. Um, yeah, I mean, Azare Stevens, if LA are selling off. I would like Seattle to do something because I think that team's good. I think they can beat anyone on their day, but I don't think they're winning a championship as they are currently formed. I think this is a team that could scare people, but without a lot of breaks, won't win a title.
Yeah.
And but with another piece, maybe they could. If you add someone like Sykes or Atkins into that mix, are they then a real threat? Because I don't think they're deep. But I'd like to see them add something.
Yeah. Um, obviously, yeah, Seattle has that huge, not huge, but they have that Katie Lou Samuelson contract on the books. And I mean, it's the same thing as, hilariously enough, her sister, where gets traded to Dallas, is waived, but Dallas was like, okay, we'll still, deal with your recovery, maybe hoping to sign her in the off season if that's a possibility. And so, I mean, that could be another potential kind of workaround for this Katie Lou Samuelson trade if it were to happen. A team could commit to the trade, waive her, and then say, hey, we're going to continue your recovery for the rest of the season and then hopefully into next season. But yeah, it's interesting. And I mean, I think about these teams that are kind of on the cusp. I think you mentioned Phoenix as another team being a potential buyer, given the fact that they are, again, in that kind of top four race. They can certainly compete as constructed right now with teams like New York and Minnesota. We've seen that all season. But they also have a lot of small contracts that could possibly be used in trades for players. So I'm curious what you think about their potential to see if they can upgrade.
Yeah, I mean they're another one who maybe you make a move for one of those bigger names. I think they probably like their smaller pieces enough that they wouldn't make a move for someone else's sort of backup pieces. I think they probably like players like Laxer and Held and Westbeld. Having sort of worked with them all season, they probably sort of want them in the fold. But if
Mhm.
you throw Kalani Brown's contract on top of their cap space, you can get to an Ariel Atkins, you can get to a Brittany Sykes. Yeah, sort of just barely. It the maths works by like fractions, but it gets there.
Yeah.
So that would probably cost them their 2027 first round pick. I have to
Mhm.
imagine, which they somehow held on to despite having to trade for Satu Sabali and Alyssa Thomas in
Yep.
the off season. I couldn't believe their 2027 pick didn't end up in those deals,
Yeah.
but yeah, they still have it. Um, but I guess, like with a lot of these teams, the question is whether you think the price is worth it,
Yeah.
because that's obviously potentially a big part of their future. So, is it worth giving that up to try and chase a championship this year? Do you think you're close enough with sort of all the injuries they've had, with the way Satu Sabali has played lately? A lot of people sort of worried about the drop off we've seen in her production,
Yeah.
and Kalia Copper still sort of working her way back into the rhythm as well. Sort of whether you think, yeah, whether does this make you a genuine title contender, which is what a lot of people have to weigh in these trades, because why make a deal that's giving up part of your future if you're not genuinely going to try and win a championship this year?
Yeah, and I think this week it's funny that the trade deadline happens to be this week because I feel like there's been such a shift in the idea of who is a title contender for this week. I mean, Minnesota has, I think, a 5.5 game lead right now, but they just lost Nafisa Collier for the next 2 weeks, so that gap could end up closing. You also have New York, who on paper should be, the other finals contender, but also again injury. Hopefully Brianna Stewart will be back by the end of the season, but there's all these things up in the air with them. You have Phoenix, who was kind of coming up as that potential finals matchup with Minnesota. Again, all the things you just mentioned could come into a factor. And then you have Indiana, who's kind of rising. The hope is that Caitlin Clark will be back before the season ends and will be able to make a playoff run with them as well. They're currently, I believe, fifth in the WNBA standings, and have won their past 5 games even without her. And so they're surging as well now too. So I feel like we're in this weird kind of area where we don't really know who exactly could be a huge playoff contender. And so those debates of whether or not to buy and sell and do whatever could just be impacted, especially with the fact that the deadline is in 2 days. You could be, forced to make a decision, and it could have a lot of impact on this season, but also, like you said, the future.
Yeah, I mean the standings have kind of concertinaed, and sort of everyone, because New York and Phoenix as well, to a certain extent, have lost a bunch of games lately and have sort of
Mhm.
come back to everyone else.
Yep.
So you look at the standings, there's like one game between, at most, between each team from 2 on down to like 10.
Yeah.
So yeah, you start thinking, well, yeah, we win a couple of games, we move 5 spots in the standings,
Yeah.
and we're right in the middle of a playoff race. We might even get home court in the first round. So
Mhm.
yeah, you can certainly see a lot of teams who might talk themselves into being buyers rather than sellers, even if 2 weeks ago they would have thought, who can we sell off to try and get some picks before the deadline hits? Yeah, and the injuries to Collier and Stewart are a reminder of what one wrong turned ankle could do to a playoff chase. That,
Yep.
yeah, you might think you're a 3 seed, and how the hell are we going to beat these teams that have been beating up the league all season long? But yeah, one star going out injured can change a lot, and yeah, who knows what might happen.
Yeah. Oh man, definitely interesting. Well, the trade deadline is Thursday, August 7th at 3 p.m. Eastern time. And so any deals that are made will have to be made until then. So that will be interesting. But tonight, of course, there's like five WNBA games. And so let's take a quick moment to just kind of go over them. Funny enough, I feel like every time, and Brian's going to laugh at this behind the scenes here. Every time there's a huge night like this, I make other plans without even really realizing what I'm doing. Tonight, I am going to watch the National Bank Open tonight in Toronto because it's the quarterfinals. I'm going to watch Taylor Fritz and Ben Shelton in back-to-back matches. But if you're not like me and making these plans, here's how you can watch the WNBA. Luckily, I do have League Pass, so I will be able to go back and watch all of these games, tomorrow. But starting at 7 p.m., we have the Dallas Wings, who are at the New York Liberty. Should be interesting given, again, how floppy New York has been in recent games. And of course, Dallas would love to be able to win a game against them. And I mean, Paige Becker's in a big city is always a fun time. So that one is at 7. Then at 8 o'clock, we have the Washington Mystics versus the Chicago Sky. Again, interesting game between two teams who are a little bit lower in the standings. It'll be interesting to see if Chicago can break their 8 game streak. But I mean, I would say Washington maybe has the upper advantage there. And then we have the West Coast games at 10 p.m. Indiana versus Los Angeles, which again, interesting given the fact that Indiana is on a 5 game winning streak. Los Angeles, again, had their own 5 game winning streak and are trying to surge into the playoffs. Then you have Connecticut at Phoenix. I guess the like Alyssa Thomas slash Dewana Bonner revenge continues. I don't know if it's really revenge when your team is last in the standings, but I digress. And then the last one is Minnesota at Seattle Storm, the first Minnesota game since Nafisa Collier has been injured. And so, yeah, we'll see how they look against Seattle. But I'm sure Seattle would love to get a home win against a team like Minnesota and be able to get back in the win column. But hearing all of that, what game on tonight's slate most intrigues you?
Well, I mean, having gotten into sort of trade mode at this point, it's partly who's actually going to appear on the floor. Are we
Mm,
going to see Ariel Atkins play for the first time in nearly a month and therefore sort of prove that she's fit and available and potentially could be traded in the next couple of days? Are we going to see Alicia Clark actually be on the floor for Seattle, or are they going to sort of wrap her in cotton wool because they want to make sure that she's tradable?
yeah,
Um, yeah, in these sorts of days just before a deadline, it's sort of intriguing who doesn't play as much as who does as well. Sort of
true.
who are they keeping out just in case, and sort of who's already in discussions. I think Indiana against LA is interesting because Indiana have been on such a tear lately. LA have won a lot of games. LA tend to help both teams' offense
Yeah.
in that, yeah, they score a lot of points. So that one could be high scoring, could be a lot of fun. Um, and sort of how Minnesota managed to cope without Collier. How are they going to adapt and play against a team like Seattle, who can show up, can disrupt your offense? So yeah, where do the where does all of Collier's sort of shots go? How does the offense change without her?
Yeah, definitely will be interesting. And again, I will be watching tomorrow, but definitely an
Yeah,
interesting.
have fun catching up with 5 games on
Yeah,
review.
literally.
Yeah,
We'll see which ones end up being good enough to go back. League Pass does have that option where they just like play the like it's like you know the game in 3 minutes. That comes in handy as well, especially for big blowouts. But yeah, so we'll catch up on that, especially as we head into the end of the week. But you're right. I mean, seeing who plays tonight and who doesn't. I mean, Satu Sabli has kind of been in and out. There's been personal reasons kind of going around there, so that's like an interesting thing to track. And yeah, then you have these teams who are in trade rumors, and we'll see if any other big trades happen before the deadline on Thursday. But thank you so much, as always, Richard, for joining. If you haven't already, make sure to go check out Richard's newsletter article on herhoopstats.com where he breaks down every single team and whether he thinks they are a buyer or seller and what moves they could make at the trade deadline. Again, you can catch that at herhoopstats.com, as well as subscribing to our podcast here, wherever you're listening on YouTube, Spotify, Apple, or wherever else. And also check us out on social media on X, Blue Sky, Instagram. And yeah, that's it. Wow. I was like, there's more spiel to do, but I got it done. Thanks so much for watching. I'm Chelsea Late. This is Richard Cohen, and we will see you next time on the Her Hoop Stats podcast.